Welcome to Me Financial, the podcast designed to inspire your financial life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I am Michelle Moses, your host, and today we are going to be talking about the Corporate Transparency Act. And I know that sounds a little bit boring, but I want to bring it to your attention because if you own an LLC and you do not register with the government, there are some huge penalties that are not only monetary, but you could go to jail. And so if you own an LLC and you already own a business, I think this is a really good episode for you. And today to talk about this, we have Shruti Gurudanti here to talk with us. She is a lawyer here in Scottsdale, Arizona. She's originally from India, and she's licensed in both India and Arizona. She focuses her practice on corporate and transactional law, including mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, private equity, and venture capital. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, so I have been wanting to bring this topic forward because I don't think it gets talked about enough. And when I talk to CPAs or other financial planners, it's like the person that owns the LLC is responsible for this, right? It's not, yes. And most people I think are used to, oh, my lawyer does that. Oh, my CPA will do that for me. Oh, my financial planner will do that. And no one else is responsible for doing this except for the business owner.
Correct.
Right. And so that's why I feel like it's not really getting the traction, I guess, maybe in the media that we see from other things. Would you kind of agree with that?
I do. I think there's a lack of information that is being provided by the government on this. Mm-hmm. And I say that not that the government is doing it intentionally. I just don't think people are focusing or paying attention to it. It is something that folks ought to look into. And like you said, CPAs and attorneys, I know at our firm, at the Rose Law Group, we've been sending emails to all of our clients, letting them know about the upcoming deadline, or, you know, if entities are formed this year, the deadline is within 90 days. So we've been letting folks know. But you're right, it is up to the entrepreneur or the management team to take into consideration that they have to complete this filing.
Okay, so let's start with exactly what is the Corporate Transparency Act and,
Sure.
Why did it come about?
Yeah, so the Corporate Transparency Act arose from the anti-money laundering laws that came up just around 2020. And this was sort of one of the big pieces that arose from that legislation. And the goal behind the Corporate Transparency Act is actually pretty nice, which is that they want to know if there is any money laundering that's taking place, and they want to curb any, sort of flow of funds that are used for wrongful activities, whether crimes, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, things like that. And by implementing the Corporate Transparency Act, the government is trying to know who are the ultimate beneficiaries or beneficial owners of the various entities.
Right, and I think it's okay to know who owns this business, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
Instead of having it be hidden.
Correct. And all they're really trying to know is who is the individual person, the natural mm-hmm. person behind these entities, because mm-hmm. there are tons of shell corporations that, as we know, are undertaking some bad acts. So mm-hmm. that's the purpose behind the Corporate Transparency Act.
Okay. All right. And so what is it requiring people to do? Can we go through kind of what it entails people to do?
Sure. So this law became effective January 1, 2024. And in a nutshell, what it says is that there are entities that are defined as reporting companies. So effectively, any LLC, corporation, an entity that is formed by filing some sort of document with the Secretary of State or any government, those entities qualify as a reporting company. Mm-hmm. So even if it's a foreign entity, for example, if you're a Canadian company but you're doing business in Arizona, you would have likely filed what's called a foreign registration application. So you are registered to do business here in the U.S. So those entities also are considered reporting companies because you filed something with the government. So those entities then have to file what's called a beneficial ownership information report. And the beneficial ownership information report essentially is to disclose who are the ultimate beneficial owners of that business. And those, we can go into detail of how they define beneficial owners.
But beneficial owner basically means that you get the money? Is that like who the money would go to, or just
No.
who controls the LLC?
Correct.
Okay.
It's more based on, so a beneficial owner is someone who has substantial control over the entity or has direct or indirect ownership of 25% or more of the underlying entity.
Okay. And is this for only LLCs, or is it for all corporations?
Good question. So any entity that is formed in the US by filing some sort of paperwork with the state government or any, sort of government authority, those entities are generally considered as reporting companies and therefore subject to the Corporate Transparency Act. So LLCs, corporations.
All of them then.
Yep.
Okay. So if you're filing paperwork to become a separate entity, then you need to do this. Okay.
Correct. If you're a sole proprietor, like, like Jody's ice cream van, probably not. But if it's Jody's ice cream van LLC with one owner, yes, you are a reporting company unless there is an exemption that applies to you. And this is also interesting to know. There are about 23 exemptions that the government has provided.
Of course.
Exactly.
Let's make it a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, 23 exemptions. And if you qualify within any of those and you're exempt, you don't have to file the beneficial ownership information report. I can talk about some of the exemptions. They're nonprofits or, banks or credit unions and things like that.
Why would the banks and credit unions be?
Excellent question.
Is it because they already have enough? They're already under another entity and they have all that other regulation?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they are already subject to several other reporting requirements. So the assumption is that, it's already taken care of.
Okay. Yeah. And so, my question before we even got started was I have my business LLC, but then I have another LLC that I used to use for flipping houses, and I haven't used it in, I think, 5 years. And so it's just sitting out there. And I asked, since I just have an LLC where I'm just reserving the name, what should I also do? Because I just did the report for the one LLC and I haven't done it for the one that's just sitting there.
Great question. And I know that a lot of folks in the real estate space have entities that they just keep on the side.
Well, and you kind of want to reserve the name.
I get it.
Too. You don't want to give up the name.
Right. So there is something called the inactive entity exemption under the Corporate Transparency Act. Now, in order to qualify as an inactive entity, there are a few things, but primarily if it was formed prior to January 1, 2020, in the last 12 months has not had any flow of funds of more than $1,000, it doesn't hold any assets, then likely it will qualify as an inactive entity and it's exempt. Now, there are a few other minor things we have to look into.
But here's the thing that concerns me is that it would be an inactive entity, but then I'm going to get a letter that says you need to prove that it's an inactive. Do you know what I mean? How the government works. And so then I'm like, I don't even want to deal with that. So I could either close it or just go onto the website and do all the paperwork, right?
I would recommend closing any inactive entity and then, recreating the entity when you need to, because why do you want to take the risk? I will say so far to date, in my experience, I haven't had any of my clients receive a letter from FinCEN or the Treasury Department about it, but you just
But the deadline isn't here. The deadline to file and to input all of your information is in January 1st, correct?
So you have segued into a very important piece, which is what is the deadline for filing? So if you have entities that were formed December 31st, 2023 and prior, then you have until December 31st, 2024 to complete that filing.
Okay.
So you have all
So we have
this
until
year.
the end of this year.
Correct. But if you have formed an entity anytime after January 1, 2024, then you have 90 days to complete that filing.
Okay. So if you created one this year, you only have 90 days.
Correct.
Okay. And so now that segues into where do we go to do this filing? And I actually found it very easy. I was very surprised. It took me not even 10 minutes. It probably took me 5 minutes.
Yes. So kudos to the government. They have made it extremely easy to do. I think it's fincen.gov, but don't quote me
No,
on
it
that.
is. It is. Yeah.
But
and
if
then
you
you'll
just simply
see,
Google.
if you go to fincen.gov, there's a button on there that says doing a BOI, a beneficiary owner.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's fairly simple. You fill out the form, submit it. You do have to submit some sort of a government ID. So your driver's license or your passport. I will recommend that folks who have multiple entities where they qualify as beneficial owners go ahead and create a FinCEN ID for yourself, which is effectively or essentially like a social security number that they will issue to you. That way, when you're filing the BOIs for other entities, you just use that ID instead of
And then
having
they
to
know it's all
upload.
attached to you.
Correct.
Okay. And you're not having to do them all separately.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And so if you, and let's pretend, I think most people have, these are probably mostly small business owners that we're talking to. They have an LLC or two, and they were probably created before 2020, December 31st, 2023.
Sure.
So they do have until the end of this year to go to fincen.gov and file their beneficiary owner information, which again took me like 5 minutes to do. It's really not a big deal, you guys. But no one else is responsible for doing it. It is only the business owner. And if they don't do it by then, so let's go over what the penalties are for not doing it.
So let me just quickly clarify on, yes, they are responsible for doing it, but if they have had a third party help them form the entity, then if that entity was formed in 2024, then there's another layer to this called the company applicant disclosure. And so if it was a law firm that helped you create it, then it could potentially be their responsibility.
Yeah,
to
then they
disclose.
would know. But if it's before and you've had your business for 10 years,
Right.
Your CPA is not saying, hey, I'm going to do this for you.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. In fact, I have most of my CPA friends are just completely staying away from it. And most law firms also are not going to take responsibility for entities that were created 10 years ago,
Right, right. Okay, so if you go on the website and you file everything, you're fine. But if you don't and you miss the deadline, what are some of the penalties that they could incur?
Right. So they're very serious about compliance with the Corporate Transparency Act. So the penalties
This is what got me serious, you guys. I was like, what? Because normally the penalty is like $30 a day.
Totally.
And so when I heard what the penalty was, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this right now.
Totally. It is $500 a day for noncompliance. And it can go, I believe, as high as $10,000 in fines and 2 years of jail time.
I mean, that's pretty hefty.
Yes.
Comparatively speaking to what penalties are
joking.
for the, I mean, they're not kidding around here.
Correct.
And I don't blame them for doing this, to be honest. I mean, I can see why people are challenging it, but if you don't have anything to hide in your business, this is totally my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer. So you do not need to agree with me. But if you don't have anything to hide, I don't really see why, okay, you already know everything else about me with my tax returns. And,
right.
You can go to the Corporation Commission and see a bunch of stuff. So, but there's other people that like to hide a bunch of stuff. And so that's what they're trying to get to.
It's been my experience that some of the larger entities or some of the folks who have multiple entities, right? Whether you're a real estate developer or, you're a big corporation with several subsidiaries, some of these folks are having some struggle in terms of figuring out, who would ultimately qualify as beneficial owners. And that makes sense. They have layers and layers of entities. So I fully recognize the struggle that they're having. Some of the smaller entities also that are feeling the struggle, what I'm hearing from them is that this is one more thing that they have to worry about as a small business, which I understand.
Yeah, but it's only once.
Right.
I mean, this isn't something that you have to do like every year with your taxes. And it takes like 5 minutes.
Correct. But if they change anything, they have 30 days to file the update. And if they don't, they again get subject to these penalties. So I understand the rub. on some of these issues, but you're absolutely right. If it's simple and, you're talking about a simple entity structure, go ahead and complete it. There shouldn't be an issue. And again, if they can save even one life, from drug trafficking or human trafficking, I'm all for this.
Right. Yeah. And I really have become, I would say over the years, I used to think, oh my gosh, all this paperwork is just so much. But I really respect our banking and law structures, I could say. And because, even if you look at what happened with crypto a couple years ago, a lot of that happened because it wasn't within our banking system and it didn't have all the checks and balances that we have. And I know it's a total pain in the butt when you have to go into the bank and provide all of this information, but there is a reason for all of that. And it's so that we have a trustworthy banking system, and so that we have a trustworthy, law. I'm not in law. So, and so that we have structures that we trust and that we're doing the right thing. And so I understand that, yes, it's a total pain, but it takes 5 minutes and we could totally help. You're right. I think, if we helped a couple people, it would be worth it.
And folks like me exist, right? Like there are lawyers out there who can help you unwind some of the nuances. And there are nuances to this, but you are absolutely right. Like having some sort of structure is always helpful. And then, change is always a struggle, but it's only a struggle initially, and then people get used to it, and it's fine. As long as it has a beneficial, outcome.
Yeah. And again, it took 5 minutes and it wasn't really a big deal. Well, you guys, if you have any questions, I'm going to have Shruti's information in the show notes, and you are welcome to reach out to her and her law firm, Rose Law Group, here in Scottsdale, Arizona. If you have any questions, I thank you guys for listening. And if you have any questions or ideas for shows, and be sure to leave me a review. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.